All right, so we're back for, I was going to call it part two, but it's just a continuation of the conversation. So let me just fire this back up here, and then we'll keep the chat going. This is the first time in 3 weeks doing the show that that we've continued and extended the conversation beyond the 1 hour. And again, that's my bad for not having the computer handy to even know the time. Normally, I would have timed it out better, but I was having such a good conversation with Damon that I didn't even pay attention to the clock. So hopefully it was the same for all of you. Hopefully you've enjoyed the chat over the last 60 minutes or so. And again, I promise we're not going to do another second 60. But if we can do 15 or 20 minutes more with Damon, once he gets back into the mix here, we'll continue our chat. And we kind of left things off talking about 1994 when he, put the I don't know if it's fair to say put the football career on pause, but 94. Then he ends up going down to Pittsburgh, playing in spring training, and was trying to latch on in Major League Baseball with the Pirates before ultimately deciding to say, all right, I scratched that itch with baseball and bring the career back to the National Football League. So once Damon joins me again here, we'll get him back into the mix. But I appreciate all of you who have joined me tonight over the course of the last hour, and for everybody that's been coming on to join the show and listen in on the interviews over the course of the last few weeks. And I'm going to do my damnedest to keep this thing going as long as this pandemic might go. I'd be lying if I said that I would love to be back working in the NBA next week and maybe not doing these shows, but at the same time, I will keep things rolling for as long as possible and as long as it takes, and as long as I've got guests willing to come on and chat with me. Just while I've got some time before Damon comes back in, Paul Jones, my longtime broadcast partner, is going to join me on the show tomorrow night. And we're not just going to talk Raptors. I want to talk to Jonesy about his career growing up in Toronto and his high school and university career at York University, but then also, playing, representing Canada and wearing that maple leaf on his chest, but also then having that dual role over the years of being a broadcaster and an educator as a principal, an elementary school principal. I think he's got some fascinating stories that we haven't always had a chance to get into because we're always just talking NBA and Raptors. And then on Thursday, Canadian filmmaker, director, Hollywood guy, Brad Payton. You might know him from movies like Rampage and Journey to the Center of the Earth. He's done a whole bunch of different movies. He's responsible for Outbreak. Daybreak. I don't know if Daybreak, if many of you have watched that on Netflix, but that's a product of Brad Payton. So Brad's going to join me on Thursday's show as well. So get Damon back into the conversation for just our extended period here. And then we'll wrap things up in the next, like I said, next 15 or 20. And Damon is here now.
Yeah.
I appreciate you doing this.
No, it's all good.
And again, that's my bad for not having the clock ready for timing it out better. At least I recognize I kind of had that internal broadcaster's clock where I feel like we might be going a little long here, and I don't want to be getting you cut off in the middle of a sentence again or something like I've had with other guests. So
right.
All right, so it doesn't happen with Pittsburgh, as you were talking about the baseball. So you're now back to the CFL, mm-hmm. and I'm glazing over a little bit here, but I want to go to 95 now, and playing south of the border in the CFL for the American experiment with the expansion, and playing for Memphis. And what I find unique about that, and listen, there might be folks watching right now, Damon, or have been watching over the last hour. Right. They know that I wasn't, and to this day I'm still not, the biggest CFL fan. So I don't want to be phony here and come across like some CFL historian or something. Right. But the American experiment with, at least in Memphis, a smaller field versus the other dimensions, the regular CFL size dimensions, when you would go on the road and play, especially in the Canadian markets. How was that just trying to morph playing the style, in a smaller stadium, but then now playing it in the States and bringing the CFL product to the American fan base? Because I'll tell you, from players I've heard from in the past and also broadcasters, I can think of one specifically. He's the radio voice now of the Golden State Warriors and has been for years. And he tells me that his time calling games for Sacramento and the gold miners was some of his favorite broadcast memories. So what was your experience with the American fans in Memphis and how they took to the game?
Well, it was unique because the big promotion, and when Memphis got it, was the game's bigger, faster, more scoring, right? And so when you get down, if you understand the Liberty Bowl and where they play, our first game of the year, we played the BC Lions, and they refused to play due to the fact because the Liberty Bowl is a natural grass field, and then they tried to expand it to the to the CFL size field, and so part of the field was grass in the middle, pretty much, and then outside it was turf. So first of all, you didn't know what cleats to you didn't know what cleats to wear, and then it ends up happening like even if you're like I break containment, I get outside the pocket, and now I'm running. That's one-on-one with this guy, and I got an extra 15 yards to get around him. I will stay in the grass area.
Yeah.
Because if I get into the turf, now you're talking about you got the wrong shoes, you don't know what's going to happen, injury, all those things. And then at the same time, the biggest difference was, especially at the Liberty Bowl, was playing on field and turf. That was a very difficult. And then in the end zones, because what teams were doing to it when they figured out that, okay, the end zone is only 10 yards. So the DBs were lined up 3 yards inside of the receiver because the only route that we could run is a slant. So you couldn't run a fade. If you throw a fade, you're going to run the guy into the wall. So if you didn't score from 30 yards and out, you wasn't scoring. It was very difficult to score. And so that's why if we had a really good field goal kicker, he would have broke the CFL record in points scored because our field goal kicker in the Liberty Bowl was getting at least 9 attempts a game. And so that was the biggest issue. And then, dude, we played a game one time and they had and Mississippi State and Alabama was playing. Come on. Okay. We had nobody at our game. So scheduling, field,
the ratio rule.
The racial rule, All-American, well, that was pretty good. But like I said, when you played against a really good Canadian team that had good Canadians, it didn't matter if you had All-Americans.
Right.
So that was an issue. And then, like I said, the promotion. And then another thing, too, it made it difficult. I think the Memphis Mad Dog was granted a team within 6 months. So the only thing that the Memphis Mad Dogs were able to do is basically just gather players. You couldn't do no promotion, couldn't sell tickets to the fan base because you had 6 months. You're just given the team, and then now you're in the league playing. And so that all made it very difficult. And plus the field sizes didn't accommodate the CFL game, and that's where the biggest issue. Now, all their ownership, they didn't have no issue in ownership in the States. Our owner was Fred Smith. The Sacramento Gold, I think the Birmingham Barracudas was owned by A.L. Williams, the insurance giant, right? And so the Sacramento Gold Miners, and then you had the Baltimore staff but the Whittenhalls. So that was the first year that you didn't hear anything about any team struggling because they had to pay, $3 million fee to get into the game. And so I think the league was dealing with some abundance of money from the franchises, and that there were no struggles in the game. But there were issues, very issues. I mean, nowadays when someone's granted a team, I mean, they have to wait a year to get in. And so that was probably the one thing I wish that our league would have done with the American teams. When you grant a team, they come in the following year. Okay.
All right. You know what stands out to me, Damon, is as we're sitting here talking, and I've known you for a while, but I don't know half these stories. I'm enjoying just listening to this as well. Is right before you came back on for our part 2 right here, I mentioned I've got Brad Payton coming on Thursday, and he's a Hollywood filmmaker, right. And he's a Canadian guy originally from Newfoundland, and he's living down in LA and Hollywood now. And I'm listening to this thinking, like, grows up in San Diego, 2-sport athlete, drafted in baseball, plays in the CFL, sets professional football records across the board, has a Hall of Fame brother, nearly made it back into baseball after 10 years in football, right. Played into his early 40s. Have you ever been approached about a movie script and like forget
No.
books? I'm serious. I'm serious.
No, but there's people who said you have a unique story over those 24 years or 23 years of playing professionally, and then understanding that shit. My 10th grade, I didn't even play football, so I thought I was too small.
Well,
But yeah, I understand that. It's been talked about before. My brother Darius, my youngest brother. I mean, we've talked about writing a book. That's probably one of the reasons why you hear the whole 9 yards, because that's not only the show that we're doing, because it actually tells all, right. The whole 9 yards, like give me everything, and so that would be the title of my book, the whole 9 yards. And then at the same time, I'm having fun. What you're doing right now is interviewing. It's fascinating to meet different people. This week we got the Rocket, and there's questions I want to ask the Rocket. The same questions you wanted to ask. So you wanted to know the inside of how did that come about? Like,
yeah.
Rocket was the most talked about college football coming out his thing, and like how did you get to the CFL? Like, I want to know that little nitty gritty and that story, and because I'm pretty sure, I mean, it was all Rocket, NFL, and then all of a sudden now, and we know part of the reason why he came, but I want to know that the information that he knew about the CFL and all those things. So I talked to him on this Thursday, so it's going to be cool.
Now, I don't know if you saw it or not, but I think your brother might be watching right now. We talked about him in the first hour of the show, so we should say hi to Marcus, but at the same time, he missed all the juice you gave him, like an hour ago. So
Yeah.
so he's late to the party with that. He was laughing about the fact that I'm talking about a movie about your life, but I'm dead serious about it. In terms of just all the different twists and turns that we've talked about over the course of the last 60, 70 minutes. To me, it's very interesting. Where your life has taken you in sports and everything kind of surrounding it. And listen, it's not fair for me to glaze over 4 or 5 years, but I'm going to do that. When you go from Memphis to BC, you win your 3rd Grey Cup. But I know a lot of people that are watching now, with due respect to those that are watching across the country and around the world for that matter, the Toronto years really stand out, I think, for a lot of people in terms of another Grey Cup, but respectfully, at your age, winning most outstanding player, and then dealing with a major injury, coming back from that, it to me, again, adds to the script of your life, adds to the story of everything you went through in those last 5-6 years, and the thrill where you kind of ignited a fan base that has very much been up and down over the years in terms of its passion or interest for the team, and more so maybe for the league overall, obviously speaking specifically about Toronto.
Well, I mean, in short, I mean, whenever team, this is the one of the reasons why, like, when I went to different teams, I always said I want to win a Grey Cup on every team that I played for. I mean, I was close, but that was a goal of mine, because I wasn't fortunate enough to play 25 years with the same team like Louis or pinball here in Toronto. But the fact that what was so unique about Toronto is the fact that I was the oldest player in the league, and I was, dealing with the oldest franchise in the league. And I always thought it was a match made in heaven if they brought me over here, due to the fact, because I watched them over the last 3 years, I guess losing the Eastern Final, and they felt that I was the missing piece. And so when you have that kind of thought process and motivation to, like, Wally just told me that, I'm in my last legs, and I ain't gonna, probably ain't gonna, get any better or win any more championships. That was motivation too, right? So,
Okay.
Like I said, I use everything for motivation. So when I came to Toronto, I was determined I wanted to win a championship here. Determined that I wanted to win a championship here, and I just felt that coming from Toronto and being able to win a championship and the same time win MOP at 41 years old or 42 years old. I'm not sure. then I realized that Toronto actually put me on a different level after that. Now it was like, he was a great player, this and that. But then all of a sudden, after winning another championship, now they say the words legend and, and all those different things. And that had a lot to do with the environment that pinball created, and the talent he had, around our football team, and the fun, and the allowing the players to really control a lot of things, and the veterans and the captains, and they really made it really fun to play. But also, you realize you're playing with some intelligent football players, especially on our defensive team. We had a very good defense, so then you understand how to manage the game, because my job is to manage the game. I'm really just like an offset of the offensive coordinator. So I know the game plan, and my job is to share it among the offensive guys. And at the same time, I have a good feel for, how your defense is playing and those things. And then you go out there and try to win games. My job, like I said, I always told my teams I played for, is the defensive. Get me to the Grey Cup game.
Yeah.
Because I understand that, offensive players put people in the seats, but defensive teams win championships. So, I tell everybody, hey, get me to the game, we're going to win.
Well, it's interesting. Somebody wrote it in the comments that I was going to mention. You win your fourth Grey Cup in 04 with the Argos. You've now won a Grey Cup, 4 total, but in 3 different decades, which is, again, crazy to me to think about. But in 04, mid-season, you break your tibia. Did you think it's done? Well, you factor in your age, and again, you've said it a few times, so maybe I'm teeing this up for you to knock it out of the park. But was that the motivation again, to come back and to prove people that, screw my age, I can still do this, I can still come back, I'll get back on the field, and you know what? I'm not only going to get back on the field, I'm going to go try and win another damn Grey Cup.
Well, I don't know why I was like, when I fractured my leg, I'm thankful enough that I was calm. For some reason, I was calm due to the fact, because, people are already speculating. I think they said it on the TSN that, I blew out my knee as ACL, I'm done, career over, all those things. And even in the midst of all that, I was calm because I didn't know. But I wanted to, do the MRI and then go from there. And then the funny part is, when we did the MRI, they said there was no ligament damage. So it wasn't ACL, it wasn't the posterior or the lateral.
Yep.
So they said, you got a fractured tibia. It was just below the knee. And I remember my front foot, when it got hit, my front foot kind of slid back a little bit. So I can see if I would have been locked, I probably would have tore up everything. But the fact that my knee slid out a little bit. But here's the thing. I met with 2 doctors. One was saying that he can come back. Based on this injury, he can come back.
Right.
The other one saying he's done. 12 weeks, he's done. He won't be able to come back. So I had to make a decision on which doctor. So I went with Dr. Aaron. And she said, hey, you can go through this. What we're going to do is, you have a cracked tibia. We're going to put a screw through the bone, which will allow you to, now it closes up the gap in there. Now you just have to rehab. You can start your rehab instantly. I started rehab as soon as I got out of the hospital. And Mark McCoy was the guy who actually got me out of it. And so they go from 12 weeks done for the season to running in 7 weeks. I came back just in time for 2 regular season games, and then we start the playoffs. And so, I could have easily had the different mindset. My career is over and all this stuff. Listen to the first doctor, but I said no. She said she's aggressive. She's progressive. She said that you can play again. You can come back this year. I'm like, okay, we taking that one. And my job is, from there, is what makes it the difficult thing for athletes is once you come off the injury, do you have the belief system and the trust that you're healed and you can come back and play the way you were playing?
You know
That's
what?
the
You
that's the
just
difference.
took the question right out of my mind, out of my mouth here, because I was going to say, as a weekend warrior, like pretty much everybody watching this right now, I believe, unless your brother's still watching,
Right.
we can't compare it to what it's like, what you deal with on the field. And I know, even just going back to playing sports as a kid and playing high school baseball and breaking my wrist and shattering my thumb and whatnot, it's that first game back where how's my body going to respond? And that's in a non-contact sport like, say, baseball, let alone I'm a quarterback
Right.
and I'm going to be getting hit from 19 different directions, potentially from my blind side. I've got to be able to move on my toes. I got to be able to, tuck it and run it, whatever it may be. And I'm coming back, 12 weeks removed, less than 12 weeks removed from a broken tibia at 40 whatever years old. How
Right.
much is that the mental game of that first hit, let alone the next 10 or 12 that come after, where it's like, is my body going to respond? And are you wincing? Are you kind of, because you can be prone, I would imagine, to hurting yourself more if you're not taking those hits properly and if you're not standing in and just trusting your doctors and more so trusting your body.
I think that's the thing that when I look back, I realized, like I said, man, wow. Do you know what team I came back against?
I don't.
Montreal.
I'm gonna guess. Okay.
Montreal, the
All
team
right.
that I got hurt by.
Yeah.
So the same team, I come off the bench and I almost bring our team back in winning the game. And so even that, right? Knowing I had to go in the game and says I'm healed and I have to go back and play. That's the first sign of, okay, you're back. You're confident in your injury and those things. That's one of the most difficult things to do when you come off an injury. How long is it going to take you to get back to where you were playing? So some guys, it takes them 2 to 3 to sometimes 2 to 3 weeks before they're back to normal. I mean, I'm already at my in my 40s. And so
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, I don't have a long time to play. And so I have to be confident in my injury, my rehab, my abilities to throw. And I think what makes it easier too is, like saying, the fact that I started to run. I was running in week 7 of, if it would have been 12 weeks, I would have missed the playoffs and everything. The
Yeah.
fact that I was running week 7, practicing and all those things, I told him, I said, hey, 2 games left, let me play. Let me get a little momentum going into the playoffs. And so I think that was probably the most difficult thing, is the mindset to be able to say that you're healed, and then you go right back and playing like you're capable of playing. And like I said, we had a good football team. I think even in that situation, we picked up Arlen Bruce in the midst of those things. And then I think we're starting to be on our way offensively. And that's what you basically ran into, is like, okay, we got on a little roll late in the year. And then after the while, it was just like, okay, we feel we can beat anybody.
So, Damon, the 04 Grey Cup, most outstanding player in 05. And then I'm kind of fast forwarding a little bit, but not much, because we're coming up towards the end of it, I suppose. Was there a sour taste at all for you, the way things ultimately ended with the Argos? And I know there was, I know we're talking about multiple quarterbacks, and we're talking about the team bringing you back. And I remember that you had that first game, and you put up solid numbers, and all of a sudden, boom, you're out. And then there's the talk about whether you're trying to usher in somebody younger and you're kind of playing that older mentor role. Then there's another injury. Did it kind of just, for as great as the career was, did it take you a while to get over the end, or did you come to grips with it in terms of how it just ultimately ended for you?
Well, I think what happens is, I understand the business and I understand the game. So, if I was a player that probably wouldn't react very well to not starting and all those things. So clearly they knew my mentality, the kind of player I was, to be able to make that move. Because if you look at that move, you'll go, well, why wouldn't he start the next week? Because he beat him out in training camp. So first of all, I didn't mind competing. So, because easily I could have been in Saskatchewan that year because Austin wanted me. They eventually won the Grey Cup that year. So the fact that I wanted to stay in Toronto and I didn't mind competing to see who wins the job, I felt I had the based on the first game, I felt I should have got another start.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't want to start me against Hamilton, 22 new players, and all those things, and dealing with a veteran quarterback. And then, because now if I put up big numbers, what do? You can't
Right.
take me out now. And so that was their ability to make that move there and then go from there throughout the season. And so after that second game, when they told me that I wasn't starting the second week, I realized that they had a plan already in place, that this is how it was going to go down. And then from there, what do you do as a football player? Do I gripe, mope, and all this thing, which I didn't do my whole career, so I'm not going to do now. But in the same time, I'm going to say I'm just going to prepare myself to play again, because it came up to that situation late in the year in the playoffs, when the stadium, we're in the playoff game, then half the stadium was cheering for me. Put Damon in.
Mm-hmm.
During that time of year, I'm healthy, I'm ready to go, playoff time, all those different things. And then the fact that you wouldn't make that move because of, we had, 2 first downs in the first half going into halftime against Winnipeg. And, okay, if you don't want to play me, then the other guy at least should have played. But then we don't score on offense until the fourth quarter. And it's like, dude, it don't make no sense. We struggled on offense.
Yeah.
At home. We win that game. We're playing Saskatchewan, which we blew them out the last game of the year. That's our opportunity to win the championship. So I was disappointed that, at least I didn't get the opportunity to play late in the year in the playoffs. But the funny thing is, I've always said to myself, there's 2 things that will cause a football player to retire. One is the skill set diminish. 2, his passion. He loses his passion. After that game, I added a third one.
Okay.
When they don't want you to play no more.
Well, because you still had the skill and you still had the passion.
Yes. And at that time, I was ready potentially to go to another team, because there's teams that called for my services. And then basically I was like saying, well, I don't want to move again for 1 year or 2 years to play.
Yeah.
So that's when I decided, okay, it's time to move on.
All right, let me ask you this, and I'm going to wrap it up shortly here, because, again, I know we're going late, and I appreciate you sticking around here.
It's all good.
So you just said because you didn't want to move. So now you're establishing a family, and you're living in the greater Toronto area, and I want to ask you now your opinion of me in terms of what I went through, because here I am, and I don't mind telling people, I'm born in 75.
You're right.
So I'm coming up as a sports fan in the let's say the early 80s, because, I'm not going to talk about the mid to late 70s when I was 3-4 years old. But in the 80s and then into the early 90s when I'm now a teenager, I was born and raised in Burlington, which for folks that don't know, Burlington, Ontario is about 25 to 30 minutes from Toronto and 15 minutes from Hamilton, if that. You're sandwiched in between
and
2 franchises.
And 15 minutes from Mississauga.
Yeah.
Right.
So you would think that I would grow up a CFL fan. I would be exposed to one of the 2 teams. I'd have I'm part of that lost generation, and I don't know why. I've come up with different reasons over the years and whatnot. I just the league never got me as a fan. I became an NBA fan with the Showtime Lakers. I was a huge Gretzky fan in the National Hockey League. Obviously, the Jays in 85, 87, 89, let alone 92, 93. The Jays are finally good. I had that draw of, as I said earlier, the Buffalo Bills and 4 straight Super Bowls, and we won't talk about them losing all 4, but, and with Buffalo being close, I just never got connected to the Ticats or to the Argos for that matter. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean to say that disrespectfully to you as a Hall of Fame player. I just never got that draw to the league. And I wonder your perspective now, living basically where I live, for argument's sake, living in this area and seeing that the Hamilton numbers for attendance are still pretty good, but I think it's kind of like there's those 20,000, those 25,000, they go, and I'm not sure if there's 25,000 after that, and you're lucky if you're getting 10 at an Argos game. What is it about this market or this league where it's still a extremely passionate, a hotbed sport, and a passionate fan base in many of the markets around the country. But in this area specifically, less with Hamilton, but it's still there with the Ticats, and certainly with the Argos, where it's just like another lost generation, or the passion just not seemingly being there the way obviously folks would want it to be.
Well, first of all, you really have to look at as Toronto is one of the bigger media markets, which they always say Toronto is very important to the CFL because not only the viewership, but the biggest TV audience is basically across the country is Toronto, and this is where everything is. And so when I first get there, just look at all the multiple sports that you're here. So I get here in 2003. The Argos at that time are probably number 2 in the city. Would you say the Leafs are always 1?
Oh yeah, Leafs are always 1.
All right. At that time, the Blue Jays and the Raptors weren't where they are today, and so, and the fact that we won, so now you go from the Leafs, it's the Argos. And then from there, it's probably the Blue Jays and then the Raptors. But the Raptors were on their way coming up. So now if I look at the generation now, you go, man, okay, the Leafs are in the playoffs. The Raptors, I mean, now the Leafs have a little bit of a challenge, who's 1 or 2, depending on how you look at it. But I would say the Raptors are number 1 in this city right now. It's the Leafs. TFC. See, TFC wasn't around when I first got here, but they're here now. And so they've moved up to number 3. And then you're talking about now who's fighting for am I missing somebody?
No, you got the J. Well, I mean, you got the Jays still, and as you say, where do the Argos fit in that mix? Toronto Wolfpack. I mean, even this rugby team's taken off, right?
Like the Jays are probably number 4.
Yeah.
And then you have the Argos.
Yeah.
That's a big difference now. That's a really big difference. And now when you're at one point when I was playing, you're number 2 in the city, to now you're number 5. And so now you're dealing with families, let alone, like you said, that lost generation. There was a point in the CFL that lost a generation of fans, which you're starting to reflect now because a lot of those fans that they lost, they were going into other sports. And now you look at that aspect, you know, what generation that was that they lost. Maybe it's your generation, like you said, in the 80s. But then we're talking about out east. Out west, it's in the 80s, 90s, it's flying out there. Yeah. You know, it's the Flutie, myself. We're all down in the western side of, Canada. But when you come here to Toronto, you realize that, man, okay, it's a big city. They got great football, basketball, and all this stuff. And so that's what they're dealing with now, let alone moving to a new field, in which I believe the field that they're playing at, the BMO, is a beautiful place to watch football. So a combination with that, even though if you're 4th, 5th, and all those things, you have to win. So you combine being 4th, 5th in the city, and then you're not winning, let alone at times people may say that they weren't exciting to watch because maybe the style of play, sometimes the type of quarterback, and I'm saying Ricky Ray's a legend and all those things, but they weren't exciting to watch offensively because big plays and all those things, like you said, offense put people in the seats, defense wins championships. So during those times, after I retired, they won 7 games in 2 seasons. They won 7 and 36. Yeah. And that's right after, I retired and O'Shea's gone. A lot of their veteran players, Pinball left coaching. And so that was a point where, man, they could have either gathered some of the momentum within those 2 years, but they struggled because they didn't find a quarterback for those 2 seasons. And they struggled at that spot. And then you go 7 and 36. You really young kids that are watching it really lose interest now, because that's why guys like me is somewhat still popular when you come to the stadium, because they remember those days. Yeah. You know how good the Argos were during that time. But yes, it's a generation. The game has changed. How you market is different. to me, it all comes down to as well as what coach you choose. Don't you notice the Leafs never hire a no-name GM or head coach? Never. They're always going to get a big name, right, that knows how to deal with media and all those different things, and then they coach. So it's difficult. There's a time too. Not only they lost, but they won. But then all of a sudden now you bring a whole different coaching staff from Montreal instead of almost trying to go within. So you look at where the two guys that did play in Toronto is what, O'Shea and Steinhauer. They're Toronto boys. They play with the Argos. And so ideally, I mean, it would have been great to get one of these guys to actually coach. And I'm not saying the other coaches that came in didn't do a good job. I'm just saying understanding the Toronto culture. We give you an example. When pinball came back, did you see the buzz of him just coming back this year?
Yeah.
Of what? Okay, we know pinball, right?
Yep.
And so even the Argos got to look at things that way as far as the marketing, former players, coaches of former players that used to be in this organization, because fans recognize that, right, with that. And so that's something that the Argos always got to look at because we're a big market team.
All right, I'm going to leave it with this then. You bring up coaching. Correct me if I'm wrong, about 6-8 months ago, I remember seeing some stories, reading some stories about whether it be head coaching or more specifically offensive coordinator. Is that still a passion for you? Would you like to be back in the league in a coaching capacity, or where does that stand now?
There is an interest for me to get into coaching. I threw my self in the hat of coaching. Did I get any coaching, interviews? No, I didn't. But even at this situation, I was actually going to go with the Argos during training camp, becoming a guest coach. So I think that was me being away for so long. I mean, that was also a question to see if I can adapt to the game and all those things. But, understandable, I left the game, but for 10 years, I've actually been working towards understanding the game on an outside looking in basis, and also working on my offensive system and all those things. And so, I have not just been doing nothing. I watch the game.
I wasn't implying that.
I see the game totally different. I see it in the big picture. And so for me is, there is an inkling that I believe that I can help. And maybe because I've been away from the game so long, for a decade, maybe they believe that, I might be out of touch or something. So they need to see me during being a guest coach for the 2 weeks there. And so I was looking forward to this before the quarantine and the coronavirus came, because, I was going to see where my passions lies and all those things once I get on the field for those 2 or 3 weeks of training camp. So I was really looking forward to it. But, I mean, who knows what's going to happen, when we eventually get out of it, and how all this is going to be. I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if we're going to have sports at all this year, or we're going to have half seasons in sport.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, if you can go back to baseball after 10 years and still have a 91-mile-an-hour fastball or something, I'm sure you can go back to football after 20 years in a Hall of Fame career and still know what the hell you're talking about as a coach. So I don't think that's a problem.
Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate that, man.
Listen, I can't thank you enough for doing this, Damon. I think we've gone like about 90 minutes now, so I appreciate you doing the extra time. I wish you nothing but success professionally, but more so personally, and certainly health and happiness. And as you said, I don't know when this thing is ending. But hopefully we're on the other side of it soon, and we can get back to football, to basketball, to sports in general, and just kind of get life back on track.
Man, thanks a lot, because I really appreciate the questions. Right, sometimes it's the questions that you ask, because there are certain things that people know the story, but then you ask the right question. Right, is what interests me, and that's why you make the dialogue so nice and made myself able to share those stories, because they're actually really unique stories that I had to think about during that time, because I want to know, like, what were you thinking, like, when you got, like you said, what were you thinking when you got your knee done and you're hearing all the speculation, like, man. and how calm I was. I mean, if you look back, I mean, I'm pretty calm because I wanted to win the game at the end of the day. Like, I don't care my knee right now. I hope we win, and then we continue to move forward, right?
Listen, man, I appreciate that, and thank you. That's kind of you to say. I had a great time doing this, and
Me
hey,
too.
As I said, I hope we're out of this on the other side of this real soon. But if it's like 4 or 5 months, I'll bring you back for part 3 or something, or we'll just chat about life and sports in general. So thanks for this.
No, absolutely. I can't wait to get on the golf course.
All right, Damon, take care. Thanks to all of you that watched as well and sent in your questions and comments. Thanks for everybody watching. All right, folks, all the best. See you, Damon.
Bye-bye.